This podcast is brought to you by StarCharge, the largest EV charging manufacturer in the world, and is also a provider of residential and commercial battery storage and microgrid solutions. And Kempower, the reliable, quick, and scalable EV charging solutions for everyone and everywhere. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Out of Spec podcast. I'm your host, Francie. As demand for clean and sustainable transportation rises, so does the need for a skilled and diverse workforce to propel the EV sector forward. In today's episode, we explore the challenges and opportunities in recruiting for the EV space, a sector that is characterized by innovation, rapid growth, and a relatively short history, which comes into play too. To join me in this conversation today, I have Raymond McSpirit on the podcast, CEO and founder of McSpirit Search and EV Recruitment, and Raymond Delfing, or Ray, who we'll call him, as to not get things confused. You're the EV sales director. And thank you both for joining me today.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you. Of course, I met Ray. I met you up at the Charin event in Cleveland, and I didn't get to see you, Raymond, but now we are all uniting on the Out of Spec podcast. And I'd love to start by setting the stage. So can you tell me a little bit about your goals and your mission with EV Recruitment?
Absolutely. So, personally, I've been recruiting in the engineering and manufacturing space for the last 10 years. And, aside from being an EV enthusiast, driving an EV, cruising around the city in my e-bike, what really attracted me to the industry is it's ultimately a combination of a lot of technical fields that are intersecting. So in my engineering and recruitment experience previously, between working with industrial electronics companies, power electronics, components companies, fuel cells, battery manufacturers, telecom, engineering services. So it's really interesting to see the industry as a whole when, most people, they see the OEMs, but, you take apart that charger, you take apart that vehicle, there's a whole tiered supply chain of contributors that, are actually, in my opinion, driving a lot of the innovations within the system. So it's been really interesting for us to kind of get a vantage point within, those other, technical markets that are contributing to this revolution. So, for us, we've been looking to differentiate ourselves by, maintaining that intellectual curiosity, because what's out there today is going to be completely different in 6 months. As you said, we had met you at the Charin Testival event, which was great. We're actually going to be exhibiting, and I'm leading a panel at the EV Charging Summit this year. And then Ray joined my team. And part of my commitment to serve the industry is to have individuals on our team that actually come from the EV space, or preferably have a technical background from the recruitment standpoint. Ray, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I was working for an energy service company for about 5 years, and started dabbling, my first year in the EV product stuff. Mostly we were focused around lighting, and then really just got an interest for it and saw the need for, obviously still today, infrastructure. And a lot of the clients I was working with were in those perfect locations. They were townships and commercial buildings with companies in them. And that really got me excited about the EV space and seeing where it was going. So when I had the opportunity to join EV Recruitment, it was kind of just a continuation of what I've been doing. But instead of working for one company to drive the EV future forward, now in a position to be able to help companies from pretty much every vertical that encompasses EV, build their teams and get their piece of the pie in this market.
Yeah, thanks for that. And Raymond, you mentioned that you have your experience getting around in things that are electric. Was that part of your motivation in moving into this space?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually had the car before we made a full commitment. So, for us, we want to focus on, the companies of today that will positively change our tomorrow. So, going back beyond 2 years, our focus is actually in water resources. So, we were working with a lot of companies in California and pump lines, pump station, levees and dams. So for us to, focus on a niche surrounding sustainability was important. So, it was an easy easy kind of transition for us, just due to kind of our interest in where, we saw the stage of the market and the growth opportunity. So personally, I had a Mustang Mach-E, somebody that drove a 10-speed GT before that. I liked the noise of that car. When the Mach-E came out, that was, to me, the best of both worlds, past, the past American muscle, mixed with the future. So, I had the Mach-E for about 2 years, and actually recently had to make the transition to the Tesla Model Y. It was purely an infrastructure decision. Perhaps maybe some of the charging networks, are in a greater volume, as we know, in California, but, being based in Philadelphia, driving to New York City, driving to DC, the infrastructure just really wasn't there for me.
Yes, I don't think that is an uncommon story to consider the infrastructure that's around you. Of course, at-home charging is awesome if you can have it. But if you're on the road, if you're commuting, if you like road trips, considering the whole ecosystem, it's definitely been at the top of mind. So yeah, interesting. You have your own experience in EVs, which is great. So to pivot over to the strategy of your work, what are the major partners or market sectors that you focus your recruitment work with or in?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say we could break it down into 5 markets. Happy to go into depth in each one. We've been working with a lot of EV charging, manufacturers. And it's been interesting to see, a transition to what I call like the Gen 2 EV charging manufacturers that, have another layer of IP or, technology, whether it's from the IoT side or, the software side. We're working with one company that allows for, remote connectivity without the use of Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. And what I've liked about the EV charging companies is there's, from a customer standpoint, there's no one size fits all solution. So, really depending on, the customer's requirements, there's a case that could be made for one charger or 5 others. And it's not just the charger. It's, ultimately it's the power, behind it. Is there, additional battery storage required? Is there, a place to integrate solar? Now there's companies looking at, microgrids. So we've been able to work with a few EV charging manufacturers that are differentiating within, certain kind of niche. That one example I gave you, so their, application would be, most useful in dead zones throughout the US, or, inside parking garages where, there's an issue connecting to Wi-Fi. And then, through our search cadence, we recognize, as you said, that's definitely, a kind of common line that's, used in any high growth market. You see kind of memes about it, where it's like, hey, I'm looking for 10 years experience in a 5-year industry. When we're recruiting for a new company in the space and they're looking for a business unit leader, they're obviously coming to us to actually find somebody that, has experience, from a company or one that's matured a little bit past them, that has, that background scaling certain teams or launching a certain product with a certain technical background. So for us, it's about identifying all those environments and then, approaching these executives and senior leadership with a role that has a lot more upside. However, when, we're building out teams, there's certain roles where, if they have budget for, that's a big thing. If you could always entice somebody with experience away. But I would say some of our most interesting searches have been when, clients are kind of open to, different environments. So for us, that's, through our search cadence and our research, again, can't, overstate that. My team with their engineering backgrounds, and, we're constantly going to all these technical trade shows and, jumping in kind of, virtual conferences. When we get on a new client, we take the time to really try to identify, what are those transferable company types or product lines that we could look for experience that would, that would make for a good employee. So I guess for that one connectivity and Bluetooth example, then we looked for people that had sales experience through certain distribution networks, resellers, because that was one of the channels. But then also, maybe smart home devices or remote lock access or, automated building systems. So for that particular client, we identified those 3 areas, and, it led to a, quick final interview process. I guess to go through, happy to jump in the various ones. Some of the trends that we've seen is on the end. So we work with manufacturers and, turnkey engineering services. We've noticed earlier this year, there's been a market entrance of a lot of telecom companies, that are looking to launch turnkey divisions. So it's not just we see it from a singular headhunting standpoint of transferability, but I think it's important to note a lot of the companies that are going to be successful in this market, they have a transferable product line and labor force that makes their pivot, a little bit, easier or natural to enter the EV market. So telecom companies, they know utilities, they know power, they have the project management, electrical engineering teams. They're kind of regionally focused. So, it's been cool working with a few of these large telecom players as well. And, when it comes to, you can't, a lot of it is like workforce retraining. So, for example, we did an electrical engineering leader placement for them who had experience with EVSE and, those high voltage equipment, and is coming in to ultimately help, train their project and engineering team on the infrastructure nuances. Similarly with, their business unit leader who's going to lead sales and oversee the project management team. So that was an interesting project. Ray, what are some other markets that we've been focused in?
Yeah, I mean, we were just at the Advanced Automotive Battery Show, so focusing on battery technology. That's a very interesting market because, as you know, that's a lot of the cost associated with EV right now of the car, and then battery storage, is going to play a big part in a sustainable charging system down the road. So that's another market as well that we've been getting into, working with clients there, trying to help them maneuver. Essentially, a lot of those companies are 50, 75-year-old battery technology companies. And they're looking to try to say, well, what is going to be the electric vehicle battery, right? What's going to be the chemistry behind that? Because that's kind of currently every day changing. There's a lot of new technologies, new chemistries that are popping up in that space. You mentioned the telecoms companies, but just turnkey companies in general. Telecoms play into that. But there are, a lot of other electrical service companies. Like I said, I came from a lighting company. Solar companies as well are kind of in that similar space. They understand the utility side, how to work with their local utility companies, as well as power supply, power demand, and how to build out those projects.
Yeah. And then also too, on the, in our EV charging client portfolio, we've been starting to work with companies, a couple that focus in charging as a service, focused on the fleet level. So, that's been really interesting to me and us. And that's the other thing, as we get to work with a new client that's, bringing a different perspective to the industry that, no other company has, we really enjoy going through the presentations that the leadership has had, looking at their wins, their, joint ventures, what differentiates them from the competition, what's their long-term value proposition. So we're just kind of curious and interested in that. But, as recruiters, that's super important because one, it helps us effectively map out the candidate targets. But I think two, we know how to articulate that in a very short amount of time to capture candidate interest. And, when it comes to, the best candidate, sure, people could be between jobs and, still a great candidate, especially in this market that's, people are getting laid off that at no fault of their own. But, most of the time, I would say, the best candidates are the ones that are happily employed. They're not spending their time, on the weekends, throwing their resume around. They're working long hours. They're happy where they are. They're hanging out with their families and their extra time. So, it's all about really us just kind of capturing their attention and articulating the level of the opportunity to at least, just get them to explore a little bit more. Then we take them through that interview process. Charging as a service companies are interested because, especially at like a fleet level, you're able to kind of take it from a CapEx to an OpEx. And that's important for them with, cash flow management. And the other part that I've learned, researching about them is being technology agnostic is important. They almost see themselves as, a technology partner where, depending on the use case, there could be different software, there could be different layer of, service required. And then I guess to the next skill set, a good segue is due to the lack of, the reliability issues that we've seen, which could, it's great. The testable, that theme was about inoperability, which I think is so important. That's the huge benefit of Tesla, right? They're vertically integrated. So not just from the manufacturing side, the infrastructure side, when there's new software, it's not a third party that has to then update every system that touches. So, I think it's important when you have companies that, are manufacturing, doing the technology, installing the chargers, doing the turnkey, and then doing the operations and maintenance, the field service, that there's like full stakeholder alignment. So, perhaps that could also be a shortcoming where we face a lot of, reliability issues as well. So another role that, we've been focused on is like asset performance and, engineering level field service individuals, remote monitoring, looking for continuous improvement, more, preventative, because at the end of the day, it is important that, not just the amount of chargers in the ground, but, the amount of uptime that they have. Because from experience, Ford, lost a customer. There were some issues with the battery and some recalls, which I could get into, but ultimately there was a lot of issues with the charging station. So, for me, like switching to, it's not too much to ask if you're, purchasing, an EV for reliable charging. Then you talk to Tesla customers, it's like, wait a second, you actually have issues? Like, I've never heard about issues. So I wanted it to work, but, maybe in a couple of years, I'll go back to the Mach-E.
Yeah. I think definitely that's something to consider. And yeah, you consider also a lot of different clients. It seems like not only those who have been in a part of the industry for a long time, maybe are a bit legacy, that are switching over to a new kind of market. So they're looking for perhaps newer experience, and also the new companies that are looking for older experience to shift. So it kind of has some diversity there, where I'm sure you have to employ a few different strategies. So do you think that whether it's key to your work or their work, a bit of an adaptive mindset to what kind of team you're trying to build and who you want to outfit it with is important?
100%. I think when a leader's looking out, building out a kind of cross-functional team, that the hiring managers that I think are approaching it the best are a little bit flexible with some of their initial hires. And then they could, build around them. So, sometimes, we may be looking for, certain criteria, but then we're sharing ideas with them where, hey, you could have somebody with a little bit less experience, but they're specialized in the space. And then maybe you could complement them, in that next phase. It's really I think for us with manufacturing, at the end of the day, like a lot of the tier 2 companies, they have been, it's very capital intensive to launch a manufacturing site. So, a lot of these companies, I would say most of the tier 2s, they've been working in adjacent products for a long time, and then are just launching their, EV focused team. So what they need completely new is sales. We see application engineering, and then kind of technical marketing. Like that is kind of like the first kind of stage. Then, there's different automotive quality in manufacturing requirements. So, then maybe they need somebody on site that's a manufacturing manager with a strong quality background, that could make sure they're, compliant there. So one example is a DC to DC converter client of ours, but, for a long time, they were working with data centers, industrial automation, and, they got into the space a couple years ago. And we've helped staff up, sales leadership, application leadership, global account managers, as well as a customer programs manager. So those key people, and then they're able to utilize a lot of their existing manufacturing and engineering team with just adding a few more kind of EV automotive focused specialists.
Mm-hmm. It seems like there are pretty clear transferable skills that you can bring over when you're moving into a new space, the EV space, for instance. And then there's some that might require specific EV focused experience. But like we said, it's a new industry. It's emerging. There's truly limited expertise that we can have in a lot of ways. I mean, I guess you could stretch that a little bit, but it seems like you do tend to focus on those transferable skills, which are important, can be very clear. But in terms of the relatively short history, what qualities do you encourage folks to consider or prioritize in potential hires?
Again, it depends on the role, I guess, to maybe start with, advice that I would have for, any candidate, that's either, especially ones that are looking to break into the space, understand and be able to articulate where exactly, your product experience is transferable. So, research yourself, maybe you have experience in a certain product category then, you see as high growth within the EV supply chain. So, to be able to articulate that, in your resume, maybe even add a line, hey, area of transferability, right? Let's say, there's a lot of gatekeepers, companies today, because it's so easy to apply to a job where there will be a LinkedIn posting and the next day there'll be like 300 applicants. And ultimately the hiring manager isn't going through all of those, but, somebody who's, not technical, internal recruiters and HR is great, but, sometimes an HR person, they're also responsible for payroll, internal relations. And then they're expected to recruit in all disciplines within that company, whether that's finance, whether that's legal, whether that's administration and engineering. So they're told, with very certain criteria from the hiring manager, hey, only share with me, the 10 top resumes. So, you have to understand that perhaps if the hiring manager had time to go through all of them, yours would have been in the top 10, but make sure you're articulating your resume where, anybody, could kind of understand it. In terms of it really depends on the role. So, for us, a lot of our sales leaders, CROs that we work with that are looking for a new like VP of sales or even just, an account executive hunter, just examples of, kind of problem solving, where have, you executed on like an enterprise level deal, how, did you salvage it? What value did you bring as an individual, speak in eyes versus, yeah, my team did this. Sometimes it gets a little bit more straightforward for engineering related roles because ultimately you have the experience or you don't. But I think, just by positioning your background with a willingness to learn, doing your research on the company, looking up the people on LinkedIn that you interviewed with, or even checking out, like, sometimes what I recommend for candidates is if you're interviewing with the C-suite, the best way to really understand like a person's mindset is, I would say, listening to a long form, communication podcast. So, I'm always sending over recent podcasts they were on, maybe there's an area of, connection, maybe there's a connection point there. You just kind of understand their tone, how they may approach the interview. So it kind of gives you kind of a leg up because you already know, the kind of personality that you're going to be speaking with over, the next 30 minutes.
That is a great bite of advice. I feel like you outlined it really well. If people are looking to move into the EV space, like that should be a sound bite that they listen to because it can be intimidating. It's a new technology. You might not have that much experience, but find your value and find a team to bring it to and be able to communicate it. Those are great points. Thank you, Raymond.
The other thing too, just to put on, especially maybe for, a recruiter's value comes in most to clients for, I would say, like, a few years experience minimum. But, just some advice for some, recent grads or college students that are looking to get into the space. I've always been like really surprised that like this year we were at the like Novi battery show. I had a Kettering intern working with me who was studying and, while she was like supporting me on the floor, also one of the days I'm like, hey, go out, like just start talking to companies, learning about things. I'm always like surprised by like the lack of college students I see, walking around a lot of these trade shows. And, sure, some of them are expensive, but, if you're going to, instead of spending your money on a Friday, Saturday night, like Novi Battery Show is a free show. Flights to Detroit are very cheap. So I would just encourage, people to, get out in front, shake some hands, ask some questions. Maybe you pick something up and then you bring that to your coursework next year to look deeper into it. And then you also have a reference point to leverage to try to get your foot in the door in that company. So I would just encourage people to, just do a little bit more research and attend some of these trade shows where a lot of these companies that are driving the innovations are there and they're open to talk.
That's a good point. I think taking that kind of initiative is really important. I wonder how much COVID has changed that, putting kids that were, in school out of all the social situation and taking that back, but really taking that step forward, just putting yourself out there. It is so appreciated. You learn so much. It's invaluable experience. So I agree. I never did that, but I think that would be a good idea to go to the trade shows. Easier said than done.
Hindsight's 2020, right?
Exactly.
Well, if the younger version of me was listening to this, then I'd hop on a flight and go.
That's exactly it. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I totally have done the same thing where it's, if I had known this when I was you in your situation, I would have loved to do this or that. And taking those risks, I think in this space is we don't know where it's going. It is such a dynamic industry. Lots of things are changing. The technology changes, the regulation changes, the standardization changes, and it's growing really fast as well. Do you see certain sectors that are growing faster than others? And also, I mean, you kind of called back to layoffs that we've seen that a lot of us have experienced. And like you said, it's not always due to your performance, but the shifting of the industry and those growing pains. So which sectors have you seen grow really quickly? And then also, do you maybe see slowing?
I think that at the end of the day, in a high growth market where there's a lot of upside and opportunity, you're having a lot of companies, have a different approach that are ultimately fighting for that same kind of market share within. So, in any high growth industry, you're going to have, ultimately more losers than winners. I think that, there's definitely been some challenges for smaller companies that maybe are, showing some, good growth to raise money in these capital markets to sustain growth. I think that's obviously trickled down. Like, it's funny, you could obviously cut up a statistic in any way, but, a lot of people are, well, EV sales, sure, we passed 1 million, but, we thought they would be a lot higher. You could also say, well, with these high interest rates, there also hasn't been a lot of sales for cars overall. So I think that, a lot of companies anticipated, more adoption. We're passing this kind of early adopter phase, and I was talking when I was selling my Mach-E back to the dealership, I was just kind of asking some questions. I was like, hey, do you have people that come in the door that, buy an EV after considering, all the vehicles? And he's like, no, everyone that walks in the door is like, hey, I want to check out the Mach-E. I'm also looking at a Tesla. I'm also looking at a Rivian. So it seems like, there's not a lot of people or not enough right now that, are evaluating. And the fact that he doesn't even, he didn't know that the sales guy didn't know that the $7,500 tax credit you could realize on site next year. And that's like in a couple of weeks. So, those are strong selling points. I don't think it's I don't think it's that complicated. Why are they not, so they're not being, whether they're incentivized enough or they're not, being trained or directed enough to actually, push the benefits of these. So I think it starts with, with the sales force and kind of education as well. So it'll be interesting to see, how next year plays out. But, there's been companies that, I don't know if we want to name names, but we've worked with some companies that,
just kidding.
Yeah, just name them, that have gone, we've seen some big companies like, Proterra, for example. It's tough, for us too, like when a client owes us, money for a lot of work that we spent on searches and, they just go under, you're in the back of the line. So it's, imagine then all the other service providers, all their, tiered manufacturers that have been supporting them that aren't getting paid. So there's definitely a trickle down effect with every, large company that goes under. For growth, I would say there's, a lot of, manufacturing, coming back to the US, which is great. I think the administration did a great job to kind of encourage that. So there's a lot of investment in the US markets. So, that's been another kind of target for us, is identifying the international companies that have been in the space at a high level, whether that's in Asia or whether that's in Europe, that then, see the opportunity in the US market, entering the US market, but as a requirement to do business here, need to have X amount made by US manufacturers. So that means, they need to have a boots on the ground team. They need to, pay for one example is a pretty reputable EV charging manufacturer from Europe. They're building out, their site in the Carolinas is going to start as more of kind of a service center. They need boots on their ground at their US based contract manufacturer. Then their, kind of supply chain changes where they need to source kind of components and sub-assemblies from US manufacturers. So there is, a growth in, I guess, every area. However, there's players in all those areas that are just, because it's just business, that are going to struggle, that are, going to get surpassed. So,
Yeah. And so as we're talking about, financial stability of the market, and I also think about sustainability, but also the mission-oriented sustainability, more of that environmental consciousness that is more and more popular, especially among the workforce and young people and older people, everyone. I mean, a lot of people are trying to say, I want to make an impact with my work. Of course, different values for different people. But Ray, have you seen an emphasis on this amongst whether it is companies recruiting or people trying to find a job with a more mission-oriented goal become more popular? Or do you think it's still kind of just, good job?
Yeah, I think that a lot of the, what companies are looking for in these employees, and kind of what Ray was touching on when saying, how to position yourself in front of these companies, is they want somebody who's driven, right, and is a problem solver and wants to innovate and contribute. That's the mindset that most of these companies are really looking for, and I think that is because that's where all of these companies are. No matter if you're on the EVSE side, I mean, obviously level 2 has kind of gotten to a point where they're pretty standard, right? But there's still a lot of room in level 3. I would say battery technology, kind of going back on that. There's a lot of room for big environmental impacts to be had. Companies there talking about saving 50% energy and producing 25% more product with like 50% less byproduct. I mean, we're not talking about a point or two, right? Which in some industries could be major changes of 0.5%, difference, right? There's still major percentages to be had in this market. And I feel like that's for the candidates and for the companies, right? Kind of that joint of like, we can both make a big impact. So yeah, I definitely think that a lot of the candidates side are, focused on sustainability. They have a general interest in that. Because that is what, at the end of the day, aligns with most of these companies' true mission statements, right? They're trying to do their part, obviously, but the end goal, right? If you're producing the car itself, the charging system, right? Okay, well, EVSE companies, I know I've worked with a lot of them, they're working with battery storage companies. They're working with power providers, right? So how can we work together to make sure that this all comes together? So I feel like each avenue, even whether it's engineering, sales, a technical position, you're always going to be surrounded by that. You're going to be selling a new product. You're going to be selling a different version of your product to really actually have an impact to what the future is going to be, which we all know is electric vehicles.
Yeah, I think the move towards, the triple bottom line, people, planet, profit is more and more not only, an ideal, but actionable because of the way that technology is going, whether regulation is pushing for it or you have innovative leaders that are saying, look, we can solve this problem, be it a social or a natural issue, and alleviate it with this kind of technology. And of course, you build a business model of it. So I think you can find the kind of technical prowess, interest, good jobs that align with missions more and more. And I think that is very, very cool. And of course, this space tends to consist of a certain demographic. I'll let you fill in the blanks. But how do you see building equity and diversity into teams to be like, what is the best approach for that? Do you see it being prioritized in the ways that it should? What's your thoughts on that?
Definitely prioritized. For us, we're very, vocal and transparent with, for when we're representing a candidate, that would be a diverse hire. We're making sure that, hey, diverse hire opportunity. As recruiters, naturally we are, we're looking at the skill sets and what's on the resume. I know from in regards to our team and the selection process, I very rarely I actually haven't come across where, I haven't submitted a candidate or added a candidate because of a certain color or sex or, belief system that they ascribe to. So all, recruitment is really based around, for us anyways, is around skill set. However, there's definitely companies that hiring managers that we're working with where, it's important for them that a particular role, they do add a diverse hire to the leadership team because it's clearly and obviously, very important. There's a lot of statistics out there with, the performance of a diverse board and leadership team and their success versus ones that aren't. So, when it comes, for us with certain search initiatives, we're looking for a diverse candidate for sure. So it's been really cool and great to see, companies prioritize that. At the end of the day, I think it's, super important and it's not, just the right thing to do. It's actually, we'll make a more productive work environment, which I think is the ultimate goal.
Yeah, I definitely, it's not just checking a box. There are true studies, there's data and statistics that point to, like you said, a diverse team, whether it's background, which is awesome. I think bringing background, but different ideas and perspectives to a team, you can have the best kind of success and be more creative with your problem solving and all of that. So very interesting. Thank you for diving into that. I'd love to touch on in your work so far. You obviously have diverse clients. You're in a very dynamic sector. Can you share a success story or a key insight from your experience in recruiting for the EV space and perhaps highlight how, the short timeline that it has existed, it presents an interesting challenge, but there's ways to overcome it and build a great team?
I would say, from a success story, there's a couple, but the most fulfillment I get is when, when we place a candidate, we're we're changing the candidate's lives and their career trajectory. We're creating a better chance of success for the client because they landed a great candidate. And, we're, working towards a better future for the next generation. So, we find, a lot of fulfillment. And then, putting myself in some of the candidate shoes, it's been really cool to, land placements of, international candidates that are having their visa sponsored, and, talking about their families and, where they want them to, go to school. I would say, despite a lot of, challenges in our political system, and this isn't just the EV industry, over the last 10 years of myself recruiting in highly technical manufacturing sectors, there's been dozens of placements of international candidates that, are adding a lot of value to the U.S., manufacturing ecosystem, and are pursuing, the American dream, and, looking to set themselves up in a better life for their families. So, I think that's, something that, I think is important to share too. I guess specific success stories within, I would say, there's this one semiconductor client that, who had diverse product lines. And as the EV product category started to, increase in revenue, this individual had more say over hiring, not just under his team, but teams that would affect his team. So really being able to strategize with him as he's maneuvering internal dynamics with other leaders to ultimately, have those positions that report into other leaders, have a background that he's also interested in. So it was cool to kind of work with him and strategize on, not just the challenges of, the candidate, but also, his internal challenges of, his positioning and working directly with him. So, then fast forward a year, we're 5 placements later, they're, doubling the revenue of their product category. They're looking to open up a new facility and expand. And, those placements were key contributors to that growth. So, a lot of our, what I enjoy is seeing, it's great. You could be transactional, which a lot of recruiters are, and land a placement. But then if you could actually fast forward a year, 2 years from that relationship, and you see the several people that you've placed there, and, they're happy, their careers are growing, they're getting promotions. I love when I see a placement I made 5 years ago then was promoted. To me, that's the best. So we are focused on, repeat business. We do get a 70%, resume to submission to interview ratio. So, we really share in our clients' wins, and, we're equally excited every time a new candidate accepts a position.
That's really great. Yeah. In terms of like key performance indicators, not just that you place someone, but what's happening a year from now, 5 years from now. I think that's really important, especially when we're thinking long term and how this space shifts. And as things shift, I'm sure you have future plans. So could you tell me a little bit about what your next goals are, what you are looking out for? Is there a certain part of the tech here or the industry that is really exciting for you?
Yeah, we're starting to work with more, technology companies. On the semiconductor side, we're working with more GaN companies. That's been interesting. Other as a service type companies that are battery as a service, charging as a service, fleet as a service, which is more kind of like a fintech product. There's a few companies that are doing that. And that's cool. The fleet as a service, because the titles are owned by a fund where investors could offset their capital gains by acquiring those titles through the fund, and then their customer has the ability to lease whether it's a vehicle or a fleet. So just as a side note, that's a new client that we've been working with. For us, it's super important for us to stay engaged in the space. That's, my commitment and, why I'm looking to hire like-minded individuals. So, we're adding to our team, this quarter. Last year we did, I called it Philly EV. So I did a 300 person networking and panel event where I brought representation from, as Ray was saying, different stakeholders within the space. So from PICO, from the utilities companies, from the director of sustainability from City Hall came, individuals from wireless charging companies, battery companies, engineering services. So we had a very successful panel, and I'm looking to build on that this year in June. Hoping to have close to 500 people out. I'm going to have the GM from EV Box on there, the chief product officer from Inductive EV, which is a wireless charging company, and then a few other tentative commitments. So, that's important to me. We're going to be sponsoring and exhibiting at the EV Charging Summit this year. That was actually one of the more exciting shows we were at last year, where I'm going to be moderating and leading a panel on changing organizational structures and workforce retraining. So, that should be interesting. But at the end of the day, it's just, trying to, set our clients up for success. So we need to grow to, make a larger impact. So yeah, it'll be exciting to see where we are this time next year.
Yeah, that sounds like a really interesting event, a great panel that you take the initiative to put together. I like that. I appreciate that. I would probably enjoy attending that event myself. Okay. I will. That would be great. And then I know you also didn't mention your voltstyles.com aspect, but do you want to talk a little bit about that in terms of, the branding side of things?
Yeah. So that was kind of just a fun project for me because I previously spent some time in the retail space in design as well. So for the holidays, it started as an idea to, give our clients a gift, but to create, industry inspired merchandise where design themes are, from our clients' product categories. So what I've done is for all my clients, created a 100% discount code for them, and then directed them to the design that I think they would be most interested in. So you could check it out at voltstyles.com. At the moment, it's 100%, and this is for the unforeseen future. 100% of proceeds are going to go to an a high school student looking to study electrical engineering. I think that as we're talking about EV adoption and society's transition, as you are, as we are, contributors to the space, it's even more important to spread that awareness and encourage, future contributors and adopters that are making a decision between another industry or, another car selection. So, to me, this was, just was a natural fit within our mission. I thought it was kind of cool and fun thing to do. And it sounds like I got to make you a discount code after this interview.
Go ahead and do that. I love it. Yeah, I think it's good to have fun as well as, do the hard work and get creative. That creative mindset, I think, cannot be overvalued. You got to have a little bit of fun sometimes and get to brainstorming. And I like that aspect too. And thank you, Raymond. And Ray, you went from tech, the technical side of things, hands-on, to this side of things. What has kept you most motivated? What has been most exciting about the work so far that you keep taking into each day after each day?
Yeah, so I was working essentially selling turnkey projects for level 2 and level 3 stations. So I spent a lot of time on the phone with Pico, one of our local providers, as well, with walking through buildings with building engineers. And then in the early days, downtime was surprisingly worse than it is today, even. So, a lot of time standing out there next to the station and on the phone with tech support at different levels and kind of learning where could this be going wrong. So that was kind of my initial curiosity. So now getting to see the whole spectrum is extremely interesting. I also drive an EV, right? So that's pretty recently for me. So, another way to see what are the challenges, right? Where are the struggles for drivers? Because I need to experience them so I can best help our clients, realize those as well. And then we can best position clients or candidates that might have that expertise to bring to the table for those companies. So for me, it's been really expanding my horizon, right, and seeing the rest of the picture. When I was just working on the charging stuff, I knew a lot about kind of that and all the verticals that go into that space. But now getting into the cable connector side, the building of the vehicle with the tier ones, the tier twos, the battery technology. It's not just the battery in the bottom of your car. There's hundreds of companies, bringing cathodes and electrode material and all of that together to pull that battery together. So for me, it's just been very, curious market to be in and get to learn in and see the different pieces of the puzzles and how everything comes together to be this, seamless experience for the user at the end of the day, where they are just plugging in a car and they're going about their day all merry, and they're not putting any thought to, what's behind the curtains that we get to dive into and learn about.
Yes, that is the ideal, right? Just don't even have to worry about this. Conversations that we have on the day-to-day will be history one day about charging infrastructure and all that. But yeah, it is a big picture. It's a lot to take in. So thank you for helping to fill in some color in this part of the exciting and growing industry, which is, recruiting for this dynamic space, as I've said, and we'll say again and again. So I appreciate your time today, Raymond and Ray, so much. I'm so glad that we got to meet half in person and half virtually. So yeah, thank you for your time and effort to sharing with me and our audience your expertise about this, I think, interesting part that we don't really cover that much on the Out of Spec podcast yet.
Yeah, we'd love to, hear from your audience, whether it's a possible client or, perhaps just a candidate, looking for some direction. So we'll always make time to, people that proactively reach out to us. I think the two markets that I'm looking forward to the most this year would be wireless charging. Have really been enjoyed following and working with the company in that space. And then, the other missing component to batteries is battery recycling company. So, once we get to that point to, ultimately recycle the full battery, that's when the loop is essentially closed, right? So, that's exciting. I'm looking forward to innovations there.
Me too. I love the topic of EV battery recycling. It is so interesting. Closing that loop, that's really, I feel like, the epitome of what we're going for here. Cradle to cradle society. So yeah, thank you both, Raymond and Ray. Of course, folks, if you have questions for them, leave them in the comments, but definitely go straight to EVRecruitment.com, reach out to them. As Raymond said, seems like they're open to it. And thank you for tuning into the Out of Spec podcast. We will catch you next time on the next episode. This podcast is brought to you by StarCharge, the largest EV charging manufacturer in the world, and is also a provider of residential and commercial battery storage and microgrid solutions. And Kempower, the reliable, quick, and scalable EV charging solutions for everyone and everywhere.